Welcome to the last part of the course Linguistics 2 English 504, in which we'll be revising all the lectures so far we've done. Now in today's lecture, which is lecture number 29, we'll be reviewing lectures from 1 to 7. Now we started with, you remember we started with the basic concept of linguistics. What is linguistics basically? Word linguistics was derived from Latin lingua, tongue, and istics, means knowledge or science. This means linguistics is a scientific study of language. You study language on scientific basis. You study language sometimes empirically. You study language by collecting data and analyzing the data. So linguistics is a science which studies the origin, organization, nature, and development of language, descriptively, historically, comparatively, and explicitly. Now look at these four aspects. Descriptively, you describe language. Historically, you talk about language as it has moved through the different ages and as it has developed through different periods of time. Comparatively, you compare languages, and explicitly you take individually each language and you take especially you analyze the different stages of the language and different levels of language. Now let's move on to the introduction of this first lecture. Linguists study general principle of language, organization, and behavior with reference to some actual language or languages. Any language can be taken for that purpose. Linguists, what do? They study general principles of language, organization, how language is organized and how language behaves, or how the language users they behave, how they use the language in different situations, how they use language in different social settings, in different contexts, and for different purposes. And this is studied with reference to some actual language. You take a language, any language, and you study the behavior of language, you study the uses of that language, you study the uses of the words, the vocabulary, the sounds used in that language. Linguistics is learning about a language rather than learning a language. And this means you don't learn a language, you learn about a language. You don't take a language and you start learning French, for example, start learning English, for example, but you study how is French made, how it is, how the French words are made, and how French sentences are made, or how English structures are made. So you study about the language, not like the language itself. For this purpose, you can take any language. You remember we compared this with learning to drive and the car engine. So learning to drive is basically the art, and when you go for the study of how a car works, that is the basically structure. So you study the structure. If you are learning how a car operates, then you would go for the structure. So here you don't really learn the art, you rather learn how language is formed, how language is generated. Now here is that example we're talking about. Example of a car. Learning how to drive is just like learning how to speak a language, because you're learning the art of driving and the art of speaking a language. But learning how a car works, that is when you're talking about the machine of the car, you're talking about the engine of the car, that is just like learning the organization of language, how the language has been organized, how the sentences are organized, how the structures are organized. So here you're studying the structure of language. This is just like learning how the car works, what is the engine structure, and where some parts are linked and how they are linked, and how one part drives the other part, or one part makes the other part move, and you can drive your car. Some questions which the linguists try to answer in linguistics are: linguists study the languages of the world in order to answer the questions like, what are the building blocks of languages? For example, the sounds, they combine to make words. Words combine into phrases and sentences further combine to make discourses or long texts. So here we have the building blocks. the structure of language, you have building blocks. What are the building blocks? Sounds, words, and sentences. Language is objective because it is observable by senses. There's no subjectivity in language structure. It is objective because it is observable by senses. You can experience the language. You can see the organs, the sound organs, the movement of throat when somebody is speaking. You can even see the written scripts. So you can experience, you can see language through senses, so it is objective. Observation leads to classification and definition. Like, for example, chemists classify into metals, non-metals, and biologists classifies organisms into plants and animals. So it's just like observation. And when you are talking about the chemists and biologists, of course they are working with materials, working with objects, and they are giving different classes of these objects. Likewise, in language, you have the building blocks, you have the subdivisions in language. So when you're observing language, you're studying language, you also give the subdivisions, and you also come to see the subdivisions or different levels of language. Linguistics is both empirical science and a social science. Empirical science in a way that you can take the data, collect the data from the respondents. You can survey, you can float a questionnaire, and when you collect the questionnaire, you can collect that data, how many people they believe in anything, or how many people they strongly believe, or strongly agree, or how many people are neutral, or how many people disagree with a certain process. So here we have empirical science when you are collecting the data, mathematical data, and then you analyze that data. Social science, when you're talking in qualitative terms, you collect the opinions of people, you collect the viewpoints of people, and then you see how the viewpoints or the opinions of people, they support a research question. So this is how we can divide science. We can say that linguistics is both empirical science and social science. Linguistics is a human discipline since it is concerned with human language. We call it a human discipline because it is related to the human process, that is speaking, using language. Since it deals with human language, so it's a human discipline. It is a part of the study of humanities. Study of literature, appreciation of beauty, and music of poetry. You can include all these things in the study of linguistics because all these things are related with humanity. So linguistics deals with humanity. Linguistics is a part of the study of humanity because in this you can include study of literature, appreciation of beauty, aesthetic sense, praising the nature, or maybe criticizing any process. So wherever the human factor is involved, or wherever the human opinion is involved, or the human life is involved, there you have linguistics coming into picture, and you express those things. So when you express those things, those ideas, you're basically using language, and that is why we say that linguistics is a study of humanities. In understanding language, humankind can understand itself. So when you are trying to understand language, you are in fact trying to understand yourself, because language has come from human beings. Language has come from you. Language has come from your friend. Language has come from people, from society. So when you are studying language, you're basically studying society, studying humanity, studying your own self. What is your behavior towards anything? What is your opinion towards anything? Since every branch of knowledge uses language, linguistics is central to all areas of knowledge. So every branch of knowledge uses language. In every branch of life, you see somewhere the use of language. So we say that language is central to all areas of knowledge. It is a centrally running thread through all the areas of knowledge, through all the branches of knowledge, because no matter you are studying philosophy, you're studying law, you're studying psychology, you do have the use of language in all these branches. So we say that linguistics is central to all the branches of knowledge. We have a quotation from Lyons which says, linguistics has natural links with a wide range of academic disciplines. No doubt in this. There is no doubt that linguistics deals with every branch, so it has a very wide range of academic disciplines. It has its role to play in all the academic disciplines, all the branches of knowledge, because you use language to express opinions, to express ideas, to give theories. So in all those processes, there is a use of language, and whenever there is a use of language, you're talking about linguistics. Now, in modern linguistics, the activity of describing the language system is the most important. So modern linguistics is basically known as descriptive linguistics. You describe things. It is the activity of describing the language system, and that is the most important activity. So we can say that modern linguistics is known as descriptive linguistics. Some brief words about the descriptive linguistics. Descriptive linguistics is concerned with the description and analysis of the ways in which a language operates, and is used by a given set of speakers at a given time. Given set of speakers, you have a given specific set of speakers and specific language coming at that very time, and that is what you describe. So when you describe that, you are basically dealing with descriptive linguistics. Descriptive language is a fundamental aspect of the study of language. That is the basic aspect. The basic aspect of the study of language is the descriptive language. In descriptive language, we describe language systematically at all levels. Now there are different levels now. Sounds, then words, sounds, words, sentences, discourses, and grammar, semantics. So different levels. At every level we describe language. We describe each level individually, and then of course we describe the link of that level with the upper level or the lower level. Historical linguistics, the other area where we study language with relation to its change historically, with relation to the impact of history, impact of the different periods of time, different periods in history, impact of the movements, impact of what happened in those periods, impact the political, socio-economic, political impacts, the social impacts on the language, and that is where we are basically looking at the changes as well. So we have a quotation from Robbins which says, historical linguistics is the study of development in language in the course of time, the ways in which languages change from period to period, and of the causes and results of such changes. It must be based on the description of two or more stages in the development of language being studied. So when you are studying language historically, you are comparing two different periods, and you are also comparing the two different versions of varieties of language being used in two different areas, and in two different eras, and in two different periods in time. No, that is where you are basically looking at the changes, how the language has progressed, and what different changes have occurred in language. A synchronic description is non-historical. A diachronic description traces the historical development of language. Lyons in 1981 said that you have two different approaches, the synchronic description and the diachronic description. So in description again we have the two subcategories. Synchronic, related with non-historical, the study of language as it exists at that very time, with no relation to its past or present or future, no relation to its development, no relation to how it was in the past, and no relation to how it would be in future. Whereas the diachronic description traces the historical development of a language, how a language has changed over a period of time, what were the impacts of different eras, different periods of history on language, how new words were coined, and how some words they were obsolete, and some new words were they entered language. So changes in the English from Old English, you have a very good example here. Changes in English from Old English to Middle English to Modern English is basically diachronic or the historical study. Whereas the structure of English as it exists today and without reference to its past shape is the synchronic study. Comparative linguistics, where two languages are compared. History of the two languages is compared to discover historical relation between two languages in comparative historical study, or philosophy. So history of two languages is compared. History of you may even compare Urdu and English, for example. You're looking at the history of Urdu, and on the other side you'll be looking at the history of English. So you're comparing the changes, you're comparing the development, how English and Urdu have developed over the period of time, what was the origin of English and what was the origin of Urdu, and how Urdu they came into being by maybe mixture of the different languages, and how English had an impact of Latin and French and different other languages. So you are basically talking about the historic development or the changes over the course of time. Such a work was dominant in the 19th century. A lot of work was done on the historical comparative linguistics, how two languages they developed. So you're comparing the two languages and looking at their structures and how the different sounds they are combined in two different languages, and how the words were formed and whether they had any relation with each other or not. Proto-language, parent language. There was a concept that there is one parent language which is called proto-language, and from that we had different languages. Like L1 and L2 are sister languages. They developed later from proto-language. All these taken together form a language family. So when they are taken together, they form a language family. Like you have Proto-Indo-European, and after that you had different languages, Latin, Greek, German and Sanskrit. They all came from a Proto-Indo-European, which is the parent language, or you call it proto-language. A sound similarity in cognate. What the linguists do, they look at the sound similarities between different words, sound similarity between different words, whether they have any relation with each other as far as the sound is concerned. They are cognates belonging to a set related to a word which may have existed in Proto-Indo-European language. So they belong to a word. You have they look at those one single word, and then they look at the two different words in two different languages, and they see whether there's any relationship relationship with the word from the proto language or the word from the parent language. So basically they are cognates. You call the pairs or the words which they take from different languages, you call them cognates. And cognates are basically, they belong to a set relating to a word which may have existed. So they have some resemblance in meaning, they have some resemblance in sound. So that is how the linguists, they analyze and they look at the cognates, and then they see their relationship with another word which may have existed in the proto-language. Comparative linguists try to construct cognate sets and reconstruct proto-forms to talk about the changes that have occurred in the development of languages. So basically they are trying to find the pairs of words, the cognate sets, which may have a relation with some word in the parent language, and that is how they study the development of language, how the language developed and how new words they came from the main word which was there in the proto-language. Comparative linguists study language changes, formation and development of languages. This is not possible without describing the related languages, and that comes in the descriptive languages. So when you are comparing languages, you cannot do without describing one language in detail. So once you're describing one language in detail, then you are basically dealing with, again, descriptive linguistics. So descriptive and comparative, they go side by side. You describe two individual languages, two independent languages, and then you try to see the relationship with the main proto-language. So you can only compare once you know the languages properly. So once you have studied them individually, only then you can compare the structures, and only then you can compare the origin of these languages. So descriptive linguistics and comparative linguistics, they go side by side. When descriptive linguistics study two or more languages that exist at a particular time, it studies the language changes. So you are, again, when you are looking at independent language, or you are looking at two different independent languages, you are dealing with descriptive, and once you are comparing them, you are again basically looking at the the change, how the languages have changed. So this way, the comparative linguistics and the descriptive linguistics, they go side by side, and you have to do both the studies together so that you know the languages independently, and then you know the relationship between two languages. Modern linguistics is, so concluding this part, we say mainly descriptive because it attempts to describe fully and accurately the structure of language as it exists at a given time. The structure of language, in what shape? Language as it exists at that very time. No relation to the past or future. So descriptive linguistics is a study where you study the language, where you describe the full and accurate structure of a particular language, and that is where you are talking about that very time, the language as it exists at that very time. Synchronic study, and that is synchronic study of language, an effort to describe language at all levels: phonological, morphological, syntactic, semantic, and discourse level. So here you have different levels of language, and you study each level, and you describe language at every individual level. At phonological level, you take care of the sounds; morphological, you take care of the morphemes, the words; and then syntactic, syntax; and then of course semantic, the meaning aspect is studied; and finally discourse level, when you have long texts which are combinations of different sentences. So there you reach the final stage. So at every level you have an independent study, and then you see the relationship of these parts and relationship of different stages. Now moving on to the next slide, what we have, the levels of linguistic analysis. Now let's look at individual levels, how we analyze different levels of language. Language has hierarchical structure. Hierarchical means that there is a certain hierarchy, or some of the low levels are there and some high levels are there. So how does language move from low level to the high level? Language made up of smaller units, which are made up of still smaller units, and finally smallest indivisible unit, single distinguishable sound, called phonemes. So what does this tell us? That the basic smallest indivisible part is phoneme, the sound, and those, they combine to make words. Words combine to make sentences, phrases, and then sentences, they are combined to make the discourses. So you have different levels. The lowest level, the basic level, is phonemes, is the sound aspect. The sounds, they are taken as the smallest indivisible parts, and they combine to make longer sentences and longer texts. So they combine to make words, and words they join to make sentences, and then sentences they join to make longer texts. Now there are rules. Rules of phonology determine occurrence and combination of particular phonemes. Rules for word formation, behavior of morphemes. Rules of sentence formation, combination and positioning of words in a sentence. And so each level is a system in itself. You have small subsystems. If you say language is a big, large system, then you have inside it small subsystems, small arrangements, or small set of rules. And these small sets of rules are basically the rules for forming up individual small systems. Like you have rules of phonology, they talk about the occurrence and combination of particular phonemes. Rules for word formation, and they talk about how the words are made by joining the phonemes. Then you have the behavior of morphemes, and then rules for sentence formation. You talk in this about the combination and positioning of words in a sentence, how the words are arranged to make a sentence. And so each level is a system in itself, and every level has its own individual system, and when these systems combine, you get larger texts. Morphology. Level of morphology is related to phonology on the other hand, and to semantics on the other. So you say, on one hand, morphology has a relationship with phonology at the lower level, has a relationship with the phonemes and the sounds. On the upper level, you have its relationship with the semantics. So you have level morphology related with sounds as well as with sentences and meanings. You see the example here, take, took, change in one of the sounds, took, and you talk about the past tense. Take, the action take plus time present. Took, the action take plus time past, and change in meaning, that changes the meaning. He takes medicine every day and he took an aspirin yesterday. So the meaning change is there. Once in one sentence you're talking about the present routine, in the other sentence you're talking about a past action which finished in the past. So change in meaning with just change in sounds. So morphology has a relationship with the sound as well as with the semantics. You change a sound of a word and sometimes the meaning changes. Syntax, the sentence, how the sentences are made. Syntax investigates the structure of sentences and the common principles that determine how phrases and sentences are built up from words. So the principles, the rules under which you form sentences from words, that is done in syntax. That is studied in syntax, how to make sentences from words. It also explores the way languages vary in their application to these common principles by looking at the variation across languages. So what does syntax do in addition? Explores the way languages change or vary in their application of these common principles by looking at the variation across languages. So when you are studying the variations or changes across languages, you are also talking about the various applications of these words or application of the common, how the principles are applied or how the application of principle is done for making words and sentences and phrases. So in syntax you also study the rules, how and the application of rules, how these rules are applied. Rules of syntax should explain how grammatical and meaningful sentences are formed. Colorless green ideas sleep furiously. Now an example here, although the sentence looks grammatically correct, colorless green ideas sleep furiously, but it is a meaningless sentence. We can't really make up, what the sentence means. Could be something abstract, but here, apparently from the surface meaning, we don't see any clear meaning of this sentence. So it's not only the arrangement of sentence that matters, but also the meaning of the sentence also matters. Semantics studies the meaning of the words and sentences independently of any context. Independently. You don't look at the context, you don't look at the structure, you basically talk about the meaning of the sentence, or you basically try to derive the meaning, and if you get the meaning, then of course it's a meaningful sentence, but sometimes, although it's grammatically correct, but doesn't have any clear meaning. Discourse. The larger chunks of writing or larger pieces of writing. Discourse, a unit of text used by linguists for analysis of linguistic phenomena that range over more than one sentence. So it's a phenomena that ranges over more than one sentence. Discourses, they have sentences more than one. Discourse is a combination of different sentences. Formal and orderly and usually extended expression of thought on a subject. Extended expression. Now one expression might be just one sentence, but when it goes beyond that sentence or it goes beyond the meaning of that sentence, then you basically have an extended impressions or extended ideas, and that you can only do by writing different sentences. So large chunk of writing is organized, of course, it's orderly, and also you can say that it's an extended meaning or extended ideas on the subject. Connected speech or writing, it's also connected, it has a clear logical link, logical organization, and proper grammatical structure. A linguistic unit as a conversation or a story larger than a sentence. You can also call it a linguistic unit. For example, a conversation, talking. Of course, conversation is meaningful and conversation is organized, logical. Or when you talk about story, you read a story. Story would have an arrangement. Sequence of events would be arranged very nicely. So basically, it's a discourse, right? So discourses, what are discourses? Large pieces of writing and they are orderly, they are organized, a proper meaning comes out of them. Now, main branches of linguistics. Language is related to the inner world of man's mind and to the outer world of society or social relationship. Language talks about the inner world and the outer world, both. What is inner world? Whatever is happening in our mind, whatever mental processes are there. And outer world, how the language is used in society. Each of these aspects has led to the study of psycholinguistics and sociolinguistics. Now, I talked about two things, processes in the brain and how it's used in society. So you have two different branches of language, psycholinguistics and sociolinguistics. What is psycholinguistics? It's a recent branch of linguistics developed in the 60s. Study of interrelationship of psychological linguistic behavior, a comparatively new branch which came up in 1960s. What is it? It's in fact a study of interrelationship of psychological linguistic behavior. Now, and uses linguistic concepts to describe psychological processes connected with the acquisition and use of language. How your brain takes language is basically the main theme of psycholinguistics. How your brain accepts things, how your brain processes sentences, processes language, and how it is generated. So whatever is happening inside the mind, that is the area of psycholinguistics. How you receive the language, which part of the brain receives the language, and which part, of course, processes the language, proper organized structures, and how it is later on uttered or generated. So that all is the domain of psycholinguistics. Psycholinguistics is also related to mental phenomena, so mental processes articulated in language behavior. It studies processes of thought, concept formation, and their articulation in language. How the thought is processed, how the concept is processed, how the concept is formed, and then of course it's the expression of that context in the shape of language. All that happens in our brain. This reveals about structures of human psychology and language. The structures of human psychology and of course their relationship with language, the structures of language. You talk about this structure, you look at the structures of language and you try to guess, what process or what thought process was there in the mind. Cognitive psychology, it explores how meanings are understood by human brain, how syntax and memory are related, and how messages are decoded and stored. Psycholinguistics studies influence of intelligence, motivation, anxiety on the kind of language understood and produced. So you're studying language, you can also find out or you can also research on the intelligence, motivation, anxiety. These are different moods of human behavior and how under the influence of these moods what type of language is generated. So yes, you can study language, and the language it gives you an idea about what was the different mental situation of the person when such and such language or such and such words were uttered. The bonds between psychology and linguistics became stronger by the extent to which language is influenced by and itself influences such things as memory, motivation, attention, recall, and perception. So all these things, they are affected by language, and in turn language is also affected by all these things like motivation, memory, recall, perception. They also have an impact on the language. Psycholinguistics is language and the mind, whereas sociolinguistics is language and community. So briefly speaking, we can say psycholinguistics is, what is it? Language and mind. And sociolinguistics, what is it? It's a language and community, or language and society. So these are the two different branches which talk about the inner world and the outer world. Sociolinguistics briefly. Language is social, cultural, geographical phenomena. Deep relationship between language and society. Geographical area considered while studying language. So you have study of language with respect to society. How language has affected because of social classes. How social classes, they have adopted different varieties of language and they're using it on different occasions. So it's basically language and society. What is the impact of language on society, and what is the impact of the social classes on language? You have examples like dialects and sociolects where you have different varieties of language. Language to be looked at from within and without a human being. Within, how the mental processes are going on, and what words are being generated, what expressions are being generated inside the mind, and outside, what is their relationship with the society, what is their relationship with the people from different classes or social classes or cultures, how are they using language, and what are the language changes among different cultures and different classes of society. Language to be studied from both points of view of form and function. You study form as well as you study the function, the role and the structure. Sociolinguistics is a study of speech functions according to the speaker, how the speaker is using speech for different functions, for different on different occasions and for different purposes. The hearer, again, a relationship between the hearer. It's also according to the hearer, how the hearer has heard a certain language, or how he is behaving, or what type of response is he giving on hearing such words or such sentences. The context and the situation. So if you look at the outside things like the context, social setting, the context is setting, environment. So according to the setting and according to the situation, what is the change in language? That is also the area of sociolinguistics, the impact of society on language, briefly speaking. Sociolinguistics deals with the exploration of the relationship between language and society, based on the fact that language is not a single homogeneous entity. Languages change. Language is naturally, there are changes occurring in language, and once there are changing, you have different situations in which you have different varieties being spoken. So it's based on the fact that language is not a single homogeneous entity. It has varieties, many varieties, which are being spoken in different parts of the world. So based on the fact that language is not single homogeneous entity, it has different forms in different situations, different structures or different forms in different situations. Changes in language occur because of changes in social situations. See, when you're dealing out extrovertly, you see the changes in society, the trends in society, they do influence the writings, because the writers of that era, they project everything that is happening, they project in their writings. So from that we see that languages change. Language has changed over a period of time, and basically there is an impact of social classes on language. Variation may occur because speakers belong to different geographical regions. As I was talking about the impact of society, well, an extended thought here that it may occur because speakers belong to different geographical regions. Since they belong to different geographical regions, there would be different kind of concepts and different kind of pronunciations that would be there coming from different regions. Examples of English received pronunciation, we call it RP as well. Southwest of England, universities of Oxford and Cambridge and BBC. So one variety, that is the RP, or the received pronunciation, and that is being used in very particular areas like West of England, universities of Oxford and Cambridge, and also the BBC English. So this is basically the standard form of English. The Queen, or the received pronunciation, the Queen, English coming from the Queen. So that is basically thought to be the pure language, the original standard English. You see some varieties here. The Cockney English being spoken by the working class people in working class people in England. Less educated people, they would speak the Cockney, they would speak a different variety of language. Indian English we have, like you have so many words from Hindi enter the English, or Pakistani English, you have so many words from Urdu, they are being adopted by the English writers. American English, Australian English, these are two different varieties of English where there is a mixing up of sounds, where some of the words are not pronounced or not included in the sentence at all, or sometimes there is a mixture of two words coming independently from Hindi and from English, or from Urdu and one word from English, and you join them, you link them, and you form a third word, you form a different word. That is a different variety. Sociolinguistics, study of language variation and change, how varieties of English are formed when people belong to a geographical region, social class, social situation and occupation. So people belonging to different geographical regions, different social classes, social situations, they have different languages, because definitely there is an impact of different languages coming from different areas. They have an impact with each other, and finally you may have a different variety or a different language. Varieties formed in various regions involve change in pronunciation and vocabulary both. So in various regions it has been observed that there are different varieties in different regions, and they involve change in pronunciation. There is a change in pronunciation of different words, and there is a different vocabulary as well. You go to another region, sometimes you don't find any word familiar to you. It's because you didn't have the basic knowledge about that language, and it's a strange language to you, and they have different vocabulary. So you can't have interaction, you can't have the mixing up. So varieties formed in various regions involve change in pronunciation. So two aspects which the writer discussed is the pronunciation and vocabulary. You might have a change in pronunciation, you also might have a change in vocabulary. Linguistic features of dialects. Syntax variation, I've gotten it, INC, nothing. The double negative, lexical variation, lift in British English and elevator in American English. Then we talked about the lexical variation, the changes in lexic. You had words like British lift in British English and elevator in American English. Dialectology, what is dialectology? It's a study of demarcation of dialects, boundaries across a region, and of specific features of each dialect. So there are thin boundaries where you can find both the languages. When you move across the borders, there is a thin line, and that line has those areas where you have the mixture of two languages. People are getting some from here and some from there. So demarcation, that boundary is called dialect boundary. Specific area of human activity. Another reason for variation is that there is a special activity of there is a special area for human activity, and how the words or the sentences or the discourses or the writings in general, they are associated with that specific area. English used in different fields of law, religion, science, sports, business, etc. Every field has specific vocabulary and manner of use. It's called register. So every field, every profession, every field has specific vocabulary. Any profession, you call about the doctors, the engineers, the business people, the working class, the sports people, all these have a certain identity, and you have religion, science, sports, business, all these words coming from different branches, coming from different professions. They have their own kind of variety, and that variety is specified for that profession. Every field has specific vocabulary and manner of use, and this is called register. We had a word register. We talked about register in details in the in some of the lectures later. We'll revise that as well. Sociology of language includes study of attitudes to language by social groups, which language is more or less important, which should be the medium of instruction. Now, what do you study in the sociology of language? You study the attitudes of language by social groups. You study which language is more important in a particular society and which is less important, and how they associate these languages with different occasions. So you have different mediums also of instruction. So which language to be put as a medium of instruction, and which language to be used as an official language of that country or society and or class. Which are legally and constitutionally recognized their status. How you look at the status. That is also in the sociology of language, how you look at the status of languages and how you look see which are the legally and constitutionally organized. Now such languages basically are used as the official languages of the country, which have very high status and which have a link with the government circles, which is legally and constitutionally recognized by the government. This language would normally taken as the official language of any country. Sociology of language related to other aspects of social world like political, economical, social. We said that, well, socio-economic, political and social changes, they have an impact on language, they have an impact on the kind of language used. So it's like the scope, that is, has a wide scope, and you have different kinds of varieties coming from different professions. Language varieties, some of the varieties we discussed briefly, and then later on in one of the last lectures we talked about the details of the varieties and the different variations and different varieties, the changes in language. Now, code, a set of rules which is used for every language, and there is a set of collection of the instructions or set of instructions which help people form the languages, which help people form the sentences. Dialect and sociolect, dialect which is spoken in one particular geographical region, sociolect spoken by a group of people, isogloss, the boundary where you have the change, the transition of language, dialect or language. You have the line between the two areas where two different languages or two different varieties are spoken. That is isogloss. Registers, we just talked about registers, that are languages related with the profession. You have the register of law, register of business, register of medicine. So language related with that very particular profession. Idiolect, diglossia, you have again the words idiolect, where you have a variety which is related with a person, a single person related with a personality. Somebody might have one style of speaking while somebody else might have a different style of talking. So all that is related, is studied in idiolect. Idiolect is basically that the study of language with relation to the individual, with relation to the person speaking it. Then you have diglossia, the pidgin, Creole, the terms. What is diglossia? Basically, when you use the different words just to finish the unpleasant. You remember we discussed it in one of the last lectures. The unpleasant effect, the negative effect, negative impression of word, you change and you give another word, a synonym, which doesn't have the negative impression. Pidgin, the language of trade, business, when two different classes having different languages, they come into contact and they develop some words, they associate those words with some objects which they are dealing with, some goods they are trading in. So that is a specific language which is understood by only those people who are involved in trade with each other. The Creole, and when the same pidgin is spoken over a large area and spoken by many people, it has developed some certain structures and rules, then you call it Creole. Next was the applied linguistics, the practical aspect of linguistics. Applied linguistics is the collective term for various applications of linguistic and phonetic scholarship to related practical fields like foreign language, teaching, lexicology, translation, speech, pathology, and therapy, error analysis. Now, different practical aspects or different branches where linguistics is practically used. You put linguistics to such a use where you get some benefits, you get some problems solved in that particular area. So practical fields like foreign language, teaching, lexicography, translation, speech, pathology and therapy, error analysis, in all these you have the application of linguistics. Linguistics is applied practically. So that is basically comes in the domain of applied linguistics. In the widest sense, applied linguistics borders on other disciplines, for example, sociology, anthropology, psychology, biology, statistics. So applied linguistics also has borders, it borders on other disciplines, right? This means that it depends on the other disciplines like sociology, anthropology, and whatever language or whatever linguistics, part of linguistics is used in different professions. Basically, it's you talk about you talk about the particular vocabulary, and you talk about the particular style which the linguistics attains according to that profession. So it borders on the other disciplines. It has a link with the other disciplines. Speech therapists, literary critics, translator, communication engineers, language teachers, syllabus formers, education planners, textbook writers, dictionary makers have found linguistics useful for their work. Now see the utility of linguistics, how much it is being used in different fields. Look at the number of fields where people are enjoying the fruits of linguistics. They are using those rules to sort out the problems there. Used in psychology, mathematics, sociology, media, neurosurgery, law, engineering, philosophy. Here you have the different branches of knowledge, branches of education, the academic branches where linguistics is being used. It is used by people in mathematics when they are designing the systems or the algorithms, where they are using the computer science knowledge and they are mixing the mathematical knowledge, mathematics knowledge with it to form to talk about the structures, to talk about the process of the psychology, process of the linguistics. So this is used in psychology, sociology, media, neurosurgery, law, engineering, philosophy. Conclusion of today's lecture, or summing up today's discussion, we say that study of linguistics basically quenches linguistic thirst. So why do you study a language? Why somebody studies language? Not just for research, but just for the thirst sometimes. Sometimes we ask people, why do you read literature? Why do you read poetry? Why do you read the fiction? So people say just to enjoy, just for the sake of it, just for the pleasure. So here language experts or the linguists, they are studying languages just to quench their own thirst. They are interested. They want to know the development of languages. They want to know what changes occurred in language. They want to know how languages are formed. They want to know the usage of different languages in different fields. So it is their interest that makes them study language, and that quenches their thirst. Everybody has people related with language, they do have concerns, and they do keep on thinking what is the origin of a certain word, or what is this language, and what is the origin of this language, when did this develop, and how this language was in the past and how it might be in future. So the people involved with linguistics, they are busy basically studying the changes, studying the history, studying the history of languages, comparing the two languages. What are they doing? They are doing sometimes just to quench their thirst, just to they are curious, just to finish their concern about the language, about various things related with language, just to finish what they just to finish that curiosity. They are curious to know what are the changes, or what is the relationship between among different languages. So this is basically the curiosity that is making them study. So you can say that language experts are studying language not just because they have to give rules, they have to give us theories, and it's their job to do that. So that is why they are studying language. But no, they have their own concerns. Sometimes somebody might start studying French and start studying the origin of French and start comparing French with English, or somebody might start studying Urdu and see the origin of Urdu, when Urdu was formed, and when Urdu came into being, and when Urdu Urdu was formed by the combination of different words from Persian and Arabic and Sanskrit and Hindi. So how Urdu was formed and what was the origin, when people started speaking the words of Urdu, and how it developed over the period of history. So it's just because of their interest, in Urdu. So study of linguistics basically quenches linguistic thirst, and it also gives us knowledge of the properties and mysteries of knowledge. It also talks about the properties of knowledge, how the different, for example, the different branches of knowledge like psychology, philosophy, law, you have business, what are different branches of knowledge and how they developed, and how language is playing a role in those branches of knowledge, how language is being used in those branches of knowledge, what new words have entered language, and how languages have attained their names, specific names related to professions, like the business language, like you have the law, legal language, you have law language related with science, scientific language. So you have different kinds of varieties, you have different kinds of words related with different professions. So that is basically the role of linguistics in different branches. So how the knowledge has developed, knowledge of the properties and mysteries of knowledge, what mysteries were there in certain knowledge. So it's language which is giving us an insight into the mysteries and insight into the properties of different branches of knowledge. We can know the mysteries of how language developed. We can know the mystery of how a certain word entered language and what was it in the past. We can also know the mystery of certain words which were there in the past and now they are not there. And we can also know what is the background of a certain word, even to the word level, even to the sound level. We can study the language, we can study the words, we can study the phonemes, we can study the sentences, and we can also study the novels and the plays. We can study the poetry, just because we know language and we are studying the language. So through the development of language, we can also study the different branches of knowledge or the properties of different branches of knowledge and the different mysteries of knowledge. So all this basically was in the first 7 lectures, where we talked about the origin of linguistics, what is linguistics, the word linguistics, what does it study, and how things are studied in linguistics and how linguistics is applied to different branches. And then we also studied what linguistics gives us, or what benefits that we get from the study of linguistics, and the different structures or different rules of formation of words, rules of formation of building, rules of formation of the structure of language, how language has different small blocks, smallest indivisible part which is phoneme. So we studied the formation of language, and then in turn its role in different branches, of human life. And we see how linguistics has a very strong link with human being, because it talks about the human activities, it talks about the human world, it talks about what activities we are busy in, it talks about what different languages we are speaking and how we are using these languages to fulfill our purposes. In the next class, we'll be taking some more lessons to revise, and I hope this lesson would give you a very good review of the first part of linguistics course, where we just explored the idea of linguistics, we explored what linguistics is and what is its role in different phenomena, natural phenomena, or in different activities of human beings. So till the next lecture, where we will be taking some more branches, it's goodbye from here.